On this episode of Made in America, we're talking embracing failure, we're talking character, passion, and wanting to be here. I'm with Marc Nemeth, president of Jonal Laboratories. Stay tuned to find out what he makes and why he makes it. Hi, it's Ari Santiago. Thanks for tuning into the Made in America podcast. I'm here with Marc Nemeth from Jonal Laboratories. Really excited to have Marc on. He's going to bring another perspective on the aerospace growth in Connecticut. Marc and I were both featured in a CBIA article together. He's a longtime Connecticut resident with a big history of a long-time successful company here. So I'm really excited to have him on and hear his perspective. Marc, thank you so much for coming today.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I look forward to it. I'd like to just put a different emphasis. Yeah,
sure.
I have a hard time using the word successful. I'd like the word survivor better.
Survivor. All right. Well, longtime survivor of business. And so, Marc, it's a Made in America podcast, and we like to start off with the same two questions. What do you make, and why do you make it?
We make seals for aerospace. I like to describe our company. It's conceptually like a bakery with a lot of design engineering and chemistry.
Okay.
What we're in business for, and why do we make it, is to service our customers. I find that's the only thing you have to do to be successful.
Absolutely right. And I think you guys are doing just that. So let's do a little bit of the background. So, how did Jonal Laboratories get founded, and how did we get here to 2019 with almost 150 employees?
We were started in 1965 by my father. He was prior to that working at AGC in Meriden for 11 years. Prior to that, he was working at DuPont in Fairfield 14 years as a research chemist. My mother passed away when I was very early in my life, in '54, and he wanted to get out of the area, and so he was recruited at AGC. It was called Gasket at that time. There were only like 3 or 4 people working there, and 11 years later, he left, and there were like 200 people working there. And he started Jonal, and Jonal was a contract manufacturer. We'd like to say job shop. We were one of 4 to 6 people quoting on making gaskets and seals at that time, and we've evolved over the years to be adjunct design assist for our customers.
Let's talk a little bit about that transition. Well, first of all, was it always seals and gaskets for aerospace? Has that always been kind of the focus?
Seals and gaskets made of rubber. It's always been a rubber focus. Yes.
Okay, and those and the usage for all those, even from the '60s onward, has really all been in the aerospace.
Yes.
Market. Okay, and so the transition from a job shop to more of like what you've said to me before is adjunct engineering, right? So kind of more high value add. Talk about that transition. There's a lot of job shops, still in Connecticut. Why did you guys make the transition, and how did
if you're a job shop and you're quoting against 3, 4, 5 different people, typically there can only be one low cost provider. And over time, you see that your margins slip. And so you sort of scratch your head and say, how can I avoid racing to the bottom line? Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you know, I'm sure you do know, but the OEMs really want you to be a manufacturing arm for them so they can continue to squeeze margins. So you have to find a way to add more value. And where we came in is we have a chemistry knowledge, and we have manufacturing experience and capability, design engineering that we've over time increased to where we're could almost be described as a engineering firm.
So like you're saying, the engineering has given you the competitive advantage, something that helps you kind of get away from just sort of a bare bones sort of price comparison, because you're helping your clients to do the design the seal. Like, where's the engineering?
We'll probably go into this later,
sure,
but we receive at the ideal state. We receive models of space, and the customer tells us the environment it's working in, and we will present them with our ideas of how to go forward. If you look at companies, at least in our space, they have their manufacturing capability, they have their chemical capability, they have their engineering capability, and then what we think is the intangible that separates us more than any of them is the customer service aspect of it, where we care. We do not have, we don't do ROI, we don't do quarterly results, and a lot of our competitors are either owned by finance companies or public companies, and they have internal measures and standards. We can we adopt our customers' problems and make them ours and solve them. So if you look at what you would call our competitors, and a lot of them have good technical ability, they have good chemistry, and the manufacturing and customer service. But if you look at Jonal, you can take a Venn diagram and you can throw those 4 circles, and they're pretty much all on top of each other. You don't see any distortion.
Right.
And there's a lot of our customers who we hear that our customers call our competitors, and they're forced to leave a voice message, and then sometimes the mailbox is full. They will, when they're working with Jonal, they have my cell number, they have the vice president's cell number, so it's not uncommon for us to get calls at night over the weekend, and they get straight to the horse's mouth.
So in an ideal situation, it sounds like customer can come to you with a problem, and you guys will engineer the solution, help them get there, as opposed to in sort of the job shop mentality, they've got to do the design, they've got to figure it out, and they're just bringing you a part to quote?
Yes. Let me go to the absolute, if you want to say funny, but it's a weird thing. We had, over the last, let's say 15 years, we had 2 calls from major companies, and they had done an internet search. And in one case, they were looking for someone to make O-rings.
Okay.
And the call went like this: "Hello, do you make O-rings?" "Yes, we make O-rings." "Would you like to make O-rings for us?" And we'd say, "Yes, of course." And they said, "Well, 3 years ago, we paid $5,000 for an O-ring." What it was this is an O-ring for the International Space Station by Boeing. Boeing was so upset with the way they were treated that they did an internet search. Another situation is we got a panic call from a company in Long Island that was working on the GE Saffron engine, and they were working with a quote-unquote competitor or someone supposedly knowing what they were doing to make a flame retardant, not flame retardant, a seal that would survive the FAA flame test, which is 2,000 degrees at 15 minutes. So they're working with them for
That's hot, by the way.
Yes,
Yeah.
but that's a requirement. So they were working with them
Very
for a
hot.
year,
Yeah.
and they put the product in test, and in 7 seconds
It's supposed to last
it
15
charred.
minutes, didn't
Yeah.
last 7 seconds.
They do an internet search, and they got us with other people. We went down there the next day, and they told us the story. They were using a certain type of rubber. We actually started laughing and said, "Well, that won't work." And they said, "Well, we know now." And so they needed a solution, and 5 weeks. They needed it in a month later, and in 5 weeks. We had a solution for them. We had to make a tool, get a tool made, develop the product, the process, and get it to them. In that 5 weeks, they had other, let's say, competitors of ours who at that point had not even signed the NDA because it had to go up the chain and down the chain. So we're making that product for them.
So Agile, high engineering, high value, be able to solve customer problems.
Sure. I went away on a business trip, and my daughter and a young engineer were together, and I come back, and there is a easel outside my door, and there was 5 sayings that I always say. So I look at the sayings, and I look at them, and I said, "Oh, there's a whole lot more than those." So I started writing them down, and they euphemistically call them Marc-isms, and so I'm up to 110, and I'm going to be that'll be the basis of my book someday, and that's everything I know about business life.
These Marc-isms, or
yes.
we're gonna have a Marc Nemeth sayings book in the not too
yes,
distant future.
yeah, that's from the
From
Chairman Marc or something. you get
from
that
the desk of the chairman.
Yeah.
So let's take one step back.
Well,
really
I
quickly.
just want to get back up.
Yeah,
So
please.
one of them is, what's it cost to get a good new customer? So you tell me, what's it cost to get a good new customer? So, let's say 25,000, or a huge company 100,000. So why do you sweat the small stuff?
Right.
Give them what they want and do it quickly, and don't fret it. Do not do ROI.
Get there, and if you do the right thing and get the right place and get the right customers, it'll take care of itself.
Yes.
And don't get stuck behind the numbers. I think it's a pretty good lesson. So let's take one step back about this conversion from the job shop. I'm just curious about that because I think it's interesting and it's a strategic move. And I wonder, was this during your time
Yes.
at John Al? And can you just talk about how did you decide what to do? How did you kind of get there?
As I mentioned prior to us going on in the late '80s, I had sort of figured out what we have to do. And when we put together a timeline for our 50th anniversary. And in my business life, if I've made 10,000 business decisions, I can guarantee you at least 70% of them have been wrong. But there were, up until a couple of years ago, there were 7 key ones that really changed the direction of the company, and I got those right. One of them was, in the late 80s, I was questioning, we need more business. How do we get more business? Well, the customer said, well, you don't get the business because your price isn't low enough. And so I'm looking at what we do to lower our price. Well, to lower our price, we had to get rid of our overhead people, the people that made John Al different than every other company, and why someone would come to us. So I said we can do that and chase the product. However, there can only be one low-cost provider. Mm-hmm. So we had to try to become a niche player, and a niche player which had a larger footprint, so we could afford the overhead that we needed to do what we did. And we were fortunate enough to pursue a division of a major company that had a division that was very, very similar to ours. And in fact, we looked up to them for many years. But that was it. It was we can't, take the reason we're in business to serve our customers to become just a manufacturing arm. We would have no value to anyone, and you wouldn't last too long.
You last too long. So, and then you make that realization, and then what's the next step, right? So okay, the realization's there. We can't just be the manufacturing arm because it's going to be a race to the bottom, margin erosion, and what are we going to do?
Well, the next big step was to pursue an acquisition to add critical mass.
And what is the critical mass? Why did you need the critical mass? Were you acquiring the more engineering talent? Was it something about size that allowed
not necessarily the engineering talent. We, if you looked at our overhead versus the people we were competing against, they did not have the chemists, they did not have the design engineers, they did not have the. Some people refer to non-value added, but I think the future of this business is in engineering and chemistry.
Yep.
And obviously manufacturing capability.
Yep.
That is what we had to, we couldn't get rid of that and retain any sort of credibility in the market. So short term we could, sure, for 3 or 4 years we'd have better numbers, but we'd have nowhere to go after that.
Right, so the idea, and so what, by acquiring this business and getting more size, it allowed the percentage of the overhead to be lower to carry those people?
Sure.
And then how did you kind of convert the customers to, instead of just looking at you as a manufacturing arm, to look at you as more of a partner? You've used that phrase, which I really liked, was sort of the adjunct engineering team. How did you pivot from a customer perspective?
Well, from a customer perspective, we're looking for customers that are OEMs in the aerospace space, in their aerospace field, let's say, with a robust design engineering component that values partnerships. Gotcha. There are companies there that don't value partnerships that are brutal. Mm-hmm. And so it's incremental. You start with a chemist, and then you bring someone in who's engineering, and then you interact with the engineers. Most OEMs want you to work through purchasing, and that's the last person you want to talk to, quite frankly.
Because they don't want to. They understand his numbers, right?
Sure, but they're the gatekeepers. So you have a relationship with purchasing where you eliminate their problems, you do what you can, and they owe you a favor, and you ask them to introduce you to the engineers there, and then you talk to the engineers and find out what problems they have. In fact, we were having with our biggest and best customer, we were having a quality issue, and they were beating us up. And I get a call halfway through the meeting, and they said on the other line, they said, "Well, did they show you the prints?" I said, "What prints?" Well, it turned out the other reason they came down there is because someone had the president of the company, very high up, had promised their customer that they would have these parts on a certain date, and the current supplier couldn't do it. or wouldn't do it. Actually, wouldn't do it.
Okay.
And they showed us the prints. And that afternoon, the vice president at that time took the engineer down to our tool maker, and we got into the fabric seal business. And we made the leap, but we made the effort. And when you get a reputation for making someone's job easier, you get people referred to you. We
Absolutely.
we were working. Pratt's our biggest and best customer, and we helped someone out at Pratt, and they got a call from Sikorsky at that time and say, "Who's a good person for doing this?" And now
John Al's name comes right up.
and now I think we're on the fast track to be Sikorsky's go-to seal provider. So we're doing.
So someone had said this a long time ago. I think it might have been even the very first Made in America episode with ACT, where we talked about, hey, when you're trying to get into one of these large OEMs, you want to get some business for Pratt or whatever. How do you make that happen? And what they talked about was try and find a problem that they have and help them solve that problem, and you'll get a customer for life. And that sort of seems like you're echoing that same thing. It takes a while to get to the person to tell you what the problem is, but you start solving problems and they fall in love.
I don't know if I'm very smart or not, but I'm a very slow learner. I was taking my first course in the MBA program at UConn. The professor brought in this gentleman who had his Christmas card was a picture of him and the Pope.
Okay.
So I asked him, how do you get to this point? How are you so successful? He said, I just talk to people. Well, I didn't know what that meant. And it took me 35 years before I figured out what that meant. And that was the issue with finding out what their problems were and solve those problems. And you got to be, as I said, you'll hear this more from me. You can't do ROI. You got to know what you want to do, and that has to become part of your DNA. And you got to budget for it, and you got to fund it, and go forward with it. So
let's pull on that thread a little bit. Is the DNA of John Al now here in 2019? How different is it from what it looked like in 2000 and in 1988? When you took over as leadership, has it changed a lot? Is the DNA roughly the same?
Yes, very, 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 very different. We're in a position where we're able to make mistakes and able to invest money. We were between 2011 and 2015. Our sales were flat. However, we were committing 10% of our sales to R&D and 2.5% to marketing. Now, whatever money we had saved in that prior to that time, we had invested in the company, and we borrowed an equal amount of that money. So we knew back in 2009, Pratt particularly had said, we're going to double and triple your business in 3 years. Well, they were only off by 3.5 years. So,
but was it still triple the business?
Yes.
Well, then
Well, but
a few extra years.
You're expecting it to hit you 2012, and it comes around 2015. So it was a great hardship. But we found some things that have allowed us to do things very different than the industry standard. So we learned that, and we incorporated that in our business. I operate, or we try to operate by relevant range. So if we know business is increasing, if you're at, let's say, $5 million, and we wanted to grow the business and become a supplier to the biggest aerospace companies in the world, we had to punch above our weight. Mm-hmm. So at a $5 million company or $4 million company, you don't have a config manager. You have the function, but you don't have a manager.
Right.
We put a config manager in, and then we put people in the positions so we can, at least organizational chart-wise, we have the purposes, and we lie to the customer a little about how big we are. White lie.
White lie.
So what happens is you build your footprint so you can handle $9 or $10 million in sales. Now, the consequence of that, what we learned, is that is very effective as the business grows, because when you hire someone and you don't have a gun to their head about we're behind in delivering this product to the customer, you can make a lot of small mistakes, and it doesn't hurt you. So people say, you have a problem hiring people. And I say, well, we're different than most of our competitors and people to talk to, because we hire people when we find them, not when we need them. So yes, if the HR person would say, yes, terrible to hire them. If you ask me, I said, no, we have built our footprint out today to be 60% bigger than we are today. So our income statement and profit goes to hell. However, we have the people there learning their jobs, making improvements. And so as the business comes in, you ride a wave and you become, it's very rewarding financially, but you develop a management team and you get to develop a philosophy.
Is this the process that allowed you to triple in size over the last 3 years and not,
Not quite 3 years, but
4 years?
We at the end of 2015, I gathered my middle management staff and I said, look, I finally figured out my job after 40 years. And my job is to manage growth over the next 5 years to be from 1x to 3x. And that had to be the case. And part of it is building your footprint before you need it. We also have one of our strategic purposes is to have a continuum of production equipment to satisfy our customers' need. We bought some very big presses that we didn't need. However, one press was sitting there for 8 years before we ever used it. And we bring a major customer in and we show them the installation we have. And we weren't operating in that space, so I told them, hang here while I set the alarm. I set the alarm. And as I start talking to them, they ignored me and they walked over to that press. And they said, we're very glad you have this. And so you have to be...
moving ahead of where...
Well, before, as I told you, back in when we were 1999, we started prototyping with this customer who basically has this product, BAE, is that we realized we were liquidating the company and on all aspects. So we were able to put money into all aspects of the company, and we saw how things went. So it was just a process that we have to stay ahead of the curve, and that means investing in all aspects of the company, employees, of course, and education and facilities and all assets.
What have you done to bring people along for the ride? Like you mentioned earlier before, kind of about the DNA of the company and how that works. And I think it's so critical, especially, I mean, you guys are up to like, what, 140?
No. We're in the 120s.
120s.
And
so but we've still a healthy number of people.
Yes, we've, in the last 18 months, we went from in the mid-60s to 120. But we were understaffed 18 months ago,
right.
Significantly understaffed. What we've done differently, people, employees, pets, they fundamentally want to do the right thing. They want to be part of something bigger and better. Now, I'm not talking about the passive-aggressive people. Right. I mean, you got to get rid of them.
Right.
But most people want to be respected. They want to be challenged. They want to be supported. And you have to do that. We have a tremendous tolerance for mistakes. In fact, I encourage mistakes. I want people to try things. I want them to fall on their face, but when they pick themselves up, they're further forward. Mm-hmm. So we give them the capabilities. We also, in the middle management people, we tell them, look, we're growing. You can design your job. What do you want to do here? We've had one person who was a design engineer and says, well, I want to be more involved in project management, between the customer and I said, quite frankly, I said, you're not going to give up what you were doing before, but if you want to go forward. We had someone that was doing purchasing, and he said, I really want to be in the flow of the product. So we give that. But the people on the floor, you want to say the lowly hourly workers, they want to be respected, mm-hmm. And they want to know what they're doing and where it goes, and they want to, it has to, they want to be treated as part of the team.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times, I will walk through the shop. I try to walk through twice a day. And especially we have a lot of Latino working mm-hmm. for us, especially the males. They love to talk to me, shake my hand, and I will tell people, some people, and I do it because I want them to feel special about things that are happening with the company.
Yeah.
That, we are going to Korea, and we had this interaction with this customer, and this is what they look like they're doing. I mean, they would never hear that, or working for somewhere else, they would never hear it. And we've had some tough times. I mean, we've had layoffs a number of years ago, and so when you ask them to, share in bad times, you better share in good times.
Too,
so last year, during the year, we gave them unannounced at various times 4 different weeks of extra pay.
Wow.
And about 10 years ago, we had the major storm. It was the end of October, and it knocked the power out. We were out for a week, and we come back early November, and I tell them, I said, look, there's 2 things we got to do. We have regular production parts we have to get out by the end of the month, and we had a lot of R&D we were doing at the time. I said, we have to get that stuff out in 3 weeks. And I told them, I said, I'm going to be paying you for the week that we weren't here, but that's contingent upon you guys getting these 2 things done. So I walk away, and then over the next couple of days, the number of people that came up to me on the sly and said, Marc, don't worry about it. We got it for you. So, it's a matter of respect. You make them part of the process.
Do you guys do any of like the sort of business core values,
yes.
Meeting rhythms? You guys have that working that?
Oh, yeah. But it's, if you read Dale Carnegie books,
Yep.
you don't need any more than that.
That's right.
And we have it posted, suppliers and the employees, the most valuable. But you have to act on it. I mean,
yes, sir.
It's sort of similar to PI, proprietary information. That's very, very good. But if you can't do the blocking and tackling, if you can't deliver, product and the quality, it doesn't do any good. So it's just acting on what you
it's funny.
profess.
It's a lot of, right. So we're maybe manufacturing, design, engineering, but here what we're talking about is to make everything work. Is it's really all about the people, treating the people with respect, giving them information, helping them be part of the team, and it seems like that's a key part of your success.
We won. We were dealing with Raytheon for a while ago, and we were the only company to win the 5-star award. That was 100% on time, 100% quality, 3 years in a row. No one. There was 5,000 vendors, and we were the only one to do it. And it's funny because we weren't able to do it the 4th year in a row because they had a threshold of business. We did not receive enough business. So, when a customer says, you're our best supplier, and we weren't able to give you enough business, you sort of question their commitment to what they're doing.
Is that disheartening?
No, that's the way it is. You understand that what a CEO of a major corporation says and how it filters down 6 or 7 or 8 levels lower, they have to measure everything. And so if you're in a department and you're the lead and there's 30 people working for you, and the chairman of the board or the CEO says, we evaluate our people all the time, and we upgrade our bottom 10% all the time. So what does that mean? When it goes down to 3 or 4, 5, 6 levels, it means we're going to get rid of 3 of the lower performing people in your group. Now, if your group is highly performing and it's a real team spirit, and your supervisor says, I don't care what it is, you get rid of those 3 people. So you get rid of 3 people, and the ability of the remaining 27 to work together has gone to hell because they know that it's a dog-eat-dog world.
That's right. Next year, one of those 3 is going to have to be gone.
Sure. So what some people do is they hire 3 people off-site, and they hire them for a year and fire them so that they can keep their team together. Or what we do is when we give bonuses out, we give it company-wide. And we don't differentiate. And then obviously there's the ability to take care of exceptional performers. Look, what I found over the years is people on the lower social, economic, education scale, they are so good at telling a phony.
Oh, yeah.
And if you try to BS them, they know it. They've been BS their whole life. Mm-hmm. But when you treat them with respect and share with them, they'll do anything for you. So it's just a matter of being consistent and
being a good person. I mean, that's
the golden rule, if you will.
That's right. That's right. Let me ask you a question. You've talked a couple times about you don't measure the ROI, and I'm a little curious about that. Obviously, at the end of the day, right? There's got to be profits. So when you're making those decisions, I don't know. Just talk about that a little bit more.
ROI.
What's the guiding star? You're not looking at ROI. What is the
I'll give you two answers.
Sure.
In our growth, we have maintained our metrics. Our metrics are 99 plus, both on quality and delivery. So how do you do it? Well, I go to the head purchasing guy at Airbus, and I ask him a question: why do you guys continue to give business to people who don't perform? He didn't like that. He didn't like that question, so he didn't give him the answer. And I told him I've written down 10 or 11 things. I forget which one it is, but let's just say 10 things that you have to be able to do in order to become 100% or 99 plus on both quality and delivery. And one of them is capacity. Another is let me back up. There are about 4 of them that can't be in the DNA of some of our competitors because they have quarterly results. They have.
And you're saying quarterly results are incompatible with 99% plus delivery and quality.
Oh, some people can do it, sure, if they put the resources in there. But it's much easier. Look, either you're serving the customer or you're serving the shareholder, the stakeholder. We serve the customer. If the customer says something, look, how many people say, I have a quota, I have to ship $2 million this quarter, and you go to the boss and say, I really should ship 1.9, and next quarter I'll be able to do this, and they'll come back to him, look, either you do it or we'll find someone else to do it because we have to meet the metrics. Either you're serving the customer or you're serving another master. Yeah, you can't do it. So
there can only be one North Star, is what you're saying.
Sure.
So
and it's very simple for us. It's the customer. Whatever the customer wants, that has to be a priority.
And then you have to make sure that you don't have bad customers. Then, right? Because
you have to choose
there are
your
customers that will abuse vendors.
There is I won't name the company.
Yes.
But there is a major aerospace company that is not anywhere near our high priority to be a customer to. DNA. It's in our DNA to be a player internationally. In fact, we won the export award, the President's Export Award in, I think it was 2015,
yep.
SBA in 2016. And so what we do is, if it's in your DNA, there's a process to follow. We need representation in Europe. We need to travel to the trade shows, and we need to meet with the customers and do what the customers want. Now, if you said to me, well, Marc, how has that been going? And I said, it's been going good. We're able to talk to whomever we want to. Well, what level of business have you gotten after 8 years of doing it? Well, I would hem and haw, and I would dance around the issue, and I'd say we have not been able to justify our investment if you look at ROI. However, if you want to value the relationships, which business is all relationships, then you would have to say we're doing very well. If I had to go, if I was a division and there were 15 other divisions, and we went to see some vice president, and I had to pitch my my European or Asian marketing venture, I would come out pretty close to the bottom. In fact, they would probably fire me because their goal is to do this.
Right.
So what we've been finding actually is that our quote-unquote competitors, and I don't call them competitors because we don't look at them as competitors. Sure, they do the same things we can do, and they will compete with us. But I view it as our relationship with the ultimate customer is by far the most important thing.
Yep.
So, and they can't do anything to affect my relationship with the customer. So
right. Only you can do that.
Yes. So what I find that seals are the cheapest thing in the jet engine or the airframe, and so we got these competitors who are divisions of major companies, and they have many divisions, and they are supplying the airframe or the engine with some very high margin and very interesting product, and the seals are like the poor stepchild.
That's right.
So they don't get the I believe
they don't get the attention. This is what you're saying from the outside. They
yes.
don't get the attention which you guys can give because this is your only.
This is
it's
our
for
only
you.
game.
It's the only game in town.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's it. That's really interesting. Do you believe that, I mean, you've grown significantly over the last 18 months, 2 years. Is that DNA? Are you able to push that through, and is that scalable, that approach?
Yes. Evidence is that I like to refer to it, and I heard you use a term. You talk about in one of the podcasts I was reviewing. You did, a white whale?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. White whale comes from Moby Dick, right?
Yeah,
Right? And that was actually based on the book about the Essex. But forget about that. The blue whale.
Yeah.
I like to say we went fishing. We caught a blue whale. The blue whale is the largest, supposedly the largest animal ever to live on Earth.
That's right.
We are partnering with the largest aerospace company in the world as they look to go after a new market, because some of our quote-unquote competitors didn't find that business attractive. Now, clearly, it's going to take a while, and it's not the perfect situation, but it's something that we're embracing 100%.
And driving in behind that. Yeah. So as you've grown, especially adding so much staff, right? Like getting people on board and getting them ingrained in the company culture is difficult. And we've talked about it here, that in some ways it's like someone coming to your organization who's new. It's like moving to a foreign country, right? You move to Germany, you don't know the language, you don't know the customs, you're not really sure what the signs all say and how to queue up for the train and whatever. And over time you kind of get better at that. And with such a huge influx of people, I'm really curious, number one, and you can pick them whichever way you want, how are you going about recruiting and successfully finding all these people? And number two, once you find them, how do you make them a part of Jonal Laboratories?
I tell my kids, and I'll tell anybody, there's 3 things that you look for when you have to make a decision: character, passion, and wanting to be there. Everything else is finessable. If you don't have those 3 things, forget it. So, obviously, technical ability is good, but you have to have people. You've got to be honest, and people will recruit and bring up, and they walk around the plant, and talk to anybody, do anything, see how we do it, and you'll walk if you walk through the plant with me, and you would see people sometimes sitting down, and if I walk in the room, they don't jump up. It's like. I take a 30,000-foot view of it. Are we meeting our commitments to the customers? I don't know if someone had just worked 4 hours straight and busted their rear end and they just need a break, or if they're having a bad day, that they're struggling with a little flu or what have you. And I'd say, sit down, don't worry about it.
You're right.
You got it covered, and they nod and they leave it at that.
Right,
and
right.
They'll see that sort of thing, and they sort of scratch their head, and if.
Yeah. So, I love that character, passion, and a want to be there.
Yeah.
So you're getting out recruiting people. So you're finding people where you've added a lot of people in the last 18 months in an environment where everybody's scrambling to find people.
Well, there are 4 types of people we hire. We hire the general business people, like the accountants and the AP people, and so that's like anything else. We hire the chemists, we hire the engineers. Those are difficult and to find them. Now, Connecticut, everybody says it's hard for Connecticut to hire people in Connecticut, which it is. However, and they say it's impossible to hire 20-year-olds. Well, that's probably true. They want to go to Boston and New York and where it's fashionable. However, 30-year-olds is a different story. Connecticut is a real good place to settle down and raise a family.
It sure is.
So if you focus on that, and if you look at the positives and not the negatives. Now, we've hired a number of 20-year-olds because we're a small company, and they can do things.
Yep.
They can move the dial.
Yep.
You can go to work at Lockheed as an engineer, and they'll put you in a room somewhere, and you're designing a bolt for the next 2 years.
Right.
Or you can come to Jonal, and we're setting up a 13-foot long press, making a 10-foot seal, and you can be on the press making that seal and trying to figure out how to do it.
Yep.
And no one's asking you for I want to report. You have salespeople on the road, and you demand a report from them, so that 30% of their time is making a report. And
right,
where they're supposed to be in front of the customer.
Right. So that's interesting, really, tactic. So let me actually ask you one question. Have you found that you've been able to retain those 20-year-olds, that you've been hiring? People do complain about that, and I've always, I wonder, is it, how much of it is, are we taking the right approach versus,
So far, I mean, we've gone from 65 to 125 in the last 18 months. So, is there a long enough time frame to look at that? But anecdotally, you hear, like someone said to me, did you hire a guy by the name of this and da da da? And I said, how'd you know about that? And he said, well, he's my son-in-law's friend. Or, I mean,
it's a small state.
And, he said, he seems. I said, what does he say? He says he seems to like it. It's
yeah.
Anecdotally, you can't take that to the bank, but on some.
I think there's a lot to be said, though, right? That you mentioned it a little bit earlier. That people, I think, of all stripes, no matter what your background is, no matter where you are, we all crave to be in a place where we can contribute, make a difference, and feel like the work that we're doing every day means something.
So what we have is what we have an area we call the bullpen. We have our design engineers on one side, and we have their chemists on the other side. And then in the center, we have a small little table, and we have a video hookup. So when we're discussing problems with our or challenges with our customers, technical challenges, not quality. Right?
Understood.
And so it's positioned in such a place that you'll end up having everybody in the bullpen, and people who come up from downstairs walking by can sit in. So you can have 15 people sitting around the table observing what's going on. They don't have to be formally invited. We have generally have a staff meeting every other week, depending on the travel. And we have some new engineers, and one of them was able to sit in the meeting, and I'm talking to him, and there's two of the other guys who weren't in there. Well, no one invited me. I said, well, you're invited. The next meeting, get there and figure out what's going on.
Right.
And it's, I went to a major company. I forget what it was, Raytheon or BAE, and they had the executive dining room right next to the cafeteria. And you walk in there, and you're looking out. At least I was looking out, and I'm seeing all these people in the shop eating their cafeteria food, and they're looking at who's going in the executive dining room. If I was the czar of that company, I would allow not everybody at once, of course, but I would have a rotating where people have the opportunity to go into the executive dining room and eat. I mean, we're all part of the same team.
That's
but
right.
It was clearly there was a divide.
A big hierarchy, and you don't think that works to the advantage of anybody in the organization?
Are you kidding me? Look, one of the things I was
we completely agree on this, by the way. But
I was taught. Used to work a dishwasher over 50 years ago, and this was told to me by a guy who was towards the end of his career, who told him his grandfather told us, and this is in the restaurant business. Take care of the employees, or they'll take care of themselves.
Absolutely true.
And
Absolutely
in the restaurant
true.
business, you know what that means.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. That's interesting. Well, you talked a little bit about investing in the organization, and that's something I'm very interested in kind of hearing about. You talked about a lot of investments, 10%. I think you said in R&D, 2.5% in marketing at a time. When you're looking at how to make those investments, there's a lot of competing demands, right, in every organization on where to invest. And there's so many great places to invest. And we've talked about people, and you talked about machinery, and there's process and facilities and IT and all that great stuff. When you guys are looking at where to invest, Marc, how are you making those decisions?
Well, the first thing you have to do, and everything I've said before, you can throw out the window if it's a matter of survival.
Okay.
All right? And then I talked about being behind the curve.
You did. If
you get behind, it's like surfing. If you can catch the wave, assuming it's a small little wave, you can stay ahead of it. If the wave goes by, it's almost impossible to get there. Yeah. As I said before,
and it's going to take a whole lot more energy to try and catch up once you're behind.
You got to be lucky.
Yeah.
Okay. Or you have a rich uncle or something.
That's also be lucky.
Yeah. So we were able to get a great job from BAE, and it gave us the resources to invest in the company. Once you're ahead of the curve, it's much easier. And you cannot do, as I said, ROI. You cannot say, I want a new mill. And are you in the business? Do you need it? You got to get it. Even though it's going to damage your bottom line. We bought two big, huge presses. And right now we don't have any business for them. But when a customer comes with a It's
But that's interesting, right? So how do you know what are the things that you need? How, like, is this just from being in the industry? Like, how do you determine that you do need that press, even if you don't have the work right away?
What do you invest in? You invest in people,
Yep.
facilities,
Yep.
technology.
Yep.
You need your capital base strong. Invest in yourself.
Yeah.
Look, this is a good time to be in aerospace business.
Yes, we've heard.
If you're not making money in the aerospace business, you're in trouble. Now, I belong to an industry group that you're familiar with, and I can count on my hand the people similar to my company that are very, very actively going after new business, building capacity. There's a lot of people there who are happy where they're. Well, first of all, if they're big companies, if they're owned by big companies, they don't get a chance to make that decision.
That's true.
But if they're private companies, there are a lot of people that don't have a succession plan, don't have anybody in the family, or they want to give the company to. So they may be taking their money, buying a sports car, buying a boat, spending time at the club, what have you. But that's okay.
Sure.
But if you have a future, you have to invest in the company. Look, if you're a $20 million company, we're not, but if you're a $20 million company and you're making $2 million and you have 5 owners, 2 of them are working in the company and 3 aren't. The people that aren't working in the company says, geez, I'm not that smart, but $2 million divided by 5 is $400,000.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the year, they're saying, where's my $400,000 check? Forget the tax issue.
Right.
And the people who are running in the business say, no, it doesn't quite work that way. We've got to invest probably 80% of that money back in the company. So the non-operating owners say, I'm going to go from $400,000 in my pocket to $100,000 in my pocket. And yes, if you want to stay viable, if you have to invest in the company. So that's what we're doing. And if you've ever gone through a point in time when you're at the edge and you're looking at bankruptcy, and you don't forget it. It's like the generation that lived through the Depression. Mm-hmm. They just won't change. Unfortunately, a lot of them are gone,
right?
But they will not change. There's some habits they have, and we, as a different generation, look at that and
I got my 90-year-old grandparents, love them to death, and they're so healthy and so active. But those old lessons, they're imprinted. Absolutely. So
it's we invest in facilities, we invest in equipment, we invest in people, and we have as I said, we have our footprint built out, pretty much built out for 60% bigger than we are, because we see business coming. Most of the new business that we're going to get is probably going to be coming from the airframe side. Now, we grew up in the Connecticut Valley, if you will, and that's pretty much jet engine.
Jet engine territory, yeah.
10, 11 years ago, I said, why aren't we in the airframe business? Well, quick research was, you need bigger equipment and you need CATIA, which is a CAD program.
Yep.
And we weren't able to afford it at the time, but we still got it. We're in the airframe business. Mm-hmm. And like anything else, it just takes a long time.
Where do you see the aerospace industry going, say, over the next 5 years or whatever?
You don't have to ask me. You can just ask with Boeing and Airbus. Both of them have said they're looking at 30,000 new substantial planes over the next 20 years. So what?
It's a good number of planes, Marc.
Sure.
And a lot of SEALs too, probably.
Oh, many SEALs. So what has happened, particularly for us, is that we have made a focus on the legacy support, sustainment, whether it's with the military, the government, or some of the OEMs. That's not an attractive business currently right now when you have such good opportunities in the rest of the business, but we're making an investment in the sustainment and working with companies there.
Some real long-term thinking, Marc, actually.
Well, we had our 50th anniversary, and the last thing
You're almost 55 right next year, I think, 2020.
And the last thing we said was to the next 50 years. We do everything long-term.
Is that something that started with your dad in 65?
No, actually, my father, he was a product of the Depression, and he valued cash, and he actually said, if you get X amount of money, you sell it, and you're set for life. And I have no interest in selling. We get calls every week,
I'm sure.
and we have no interest. It's a family asset, and my kids very much like the idea of running the business.
Do they? We really hadn't talked about that. I was curious. I know you have 3 daughters, and 2 of them are working in the business and local, and one of them's not. You is the vision? You think they're really engaged and they'd like to carry on?
It varies. The one who's down in D.C. is interested but not involved.
Not right.
The one who's the middle daughter has her foot in the musical theater acting world, and also working here. And she loves to travel and she's very good at sales and all. But she may go back to school and become a PA, and it may not be for her. But I thought it was very important that my youngest daughter have someone she can talk to down the road. So knowing enough about the business to do it. My youngest daughter, very much involved in it, and as I said, she feels that she can impact people's lives by what we do at Jonal.
There's no question.
That is it, and so we're bringing in young people, and we're making the long-term investments.
That's really, Marc, it's really fantastic stuff, and I think a great, Connecticut success story. And I know you've been involved. You've been a big promoter of your organization. If you go online, anyone does a little bit of research, you've been down to D.C., you're involved in going overseas and doing trade missions and all that. You've been very, very active in the Connecticut business community. I think it's really impressive and a good testament. We talked earlier about the importance of being part of that.
Well, I'd like to say something about that.
Sure.
I think we've been lucky because we've been good to some people who are influential. But I got to tell you, winning the Export Award, going down to D.C., sitting in on Macron's address, there could have been any of 200 different companies. There is a phenomenal number of companies in this state that do the right thing. Mm-hmm. And they probably haven't been as successful as we are telling their story. But there's a lot of people. I like to joke with people, older people. I said, someone watches Dallas, the old show Dallas, and they'd come to me and think that's the way business is run. and I said, you guys haven't a clue. You can there could be 15 companies in Meriden, and you can go to them, and they'd tell you the same story I'm telling you. And they do the right thing. They support community nonprofits. They support, all these organizations. They do it quietly, and you wouldn't know about them.
Yep.
But we just happen to get a lot of the publicity, but it could be any one of them.
What's kind of, what's inside you? What's the fire, Marc, that kind of has pushed you to do all this? And I mean, we didn't really get into there's a 55 years almost of history, is a long history for Jonal. But I mean, you've been through a lot, right? There was a transition in the late 80s. There was the bankruptcy you referenced. You've kind of really rebuilt, and you've done a lot. You're engaged in the
Let's
community.
be clear. We did not go bankrupt. We were looking at it. But
no.
Okay.
But you, like you say, got to the edge and had some challenges.
Sure. The first thing I said, though, when you said successful, I found it very hard over the years to use the word successful. As I said, it was survivor that I thought was important.
Some people might say surviving is success, right?
Okay, I won't argue with that, and I will use the word successful now because I think we've reached a stage where I could reasonably say that personally. This may not sound right, but I have no other choice.
Right.
There's not a lot of things that I thought I was good at. When you're in your 20s, you think you're good at everything. As you become older and you see how things blow up and they don't work out the way you thought, and then you gravitate to certain areas where you're comfortable and you tend to be good at. So this is it for me. If someone said, you're unable to go to work and we want you, here's all the money you need, do something, I would be lost.
Start another business?
I have enough, I had a high school teacher. He said, you're rich if you have some money you don't know what to do with, whether it's 50 cents or $50 million. My lifestyle's established. I'm doing what I want to do, very simply and very cheaply. I don't have a lot of outside interest. I don't have a huge bucket list. My wife does, so she keeps me moving along that line.
Yeah.
And so it's the simple things, that almost anybody can do if they're reasonably successful. Wife and I, she was a teacher for a long time, and she had some time off during the vacation. Said, I've never been to New Orleans. Why don't we go to New Orleans? So my youngest daughter was living with us at the time. She said, I have never been there. she gets on the texting to her sisters. 20 minutes later, it turned into a family trip. So we're down in New Orleans for 3 days, and we had a great time doing the alligator tour and
Sure.
jogging
It's a great
around
city.
and the beignets or whatever
Yep,
it is.
yep, yep.
And that was the first of one of 5 family trips. Recently, we went to Napa, Sonoma, and it turned, and those are very, very rewarding. Now, I said as a parent, you know your success as a parent if your kids talk to you when you're when it's all said and done. So we have we go on family vacations, and they're cool about it. Now, when they get married, that may change, but right now we're enjoying that. So yeah, there's
you've been through a lot. You lost your mom. You lost your mom at a young age. I mean, it's you sort of shunned the successful moniker, and you wanted to go to Survivor, and that's okay. But I think when I look back, right, at what I wanted to do, if I can go and look back and say, I've been able to have a business that impacted positively a lot of people's lives. I had a successful marriage, and I raised my kids to adulthood to be relatively well-adjusted kids that are doing what they want. And to your earlier point, that still want to hang out with me. I mean, that's a bucket list I can live with. So I think on that score, Marc, you've been pretty successful.
I was just thinking about this morning. Is that it's like in my 20s, my kids are always saying, Dad, you two were so lucky you found each other. And I said, I was not a very desirable catch way back when, and now you go through the living process, and you try to do the right thing. And I got to tell you, I don't know what level of spirituality you are or people listening to this, but I firmly believe that a lot of the success that we've had at Jonal is because over the years we've tried to do the right things. We've had some lucky breaks, and I can't explain it any other way.
No, that's fantastic. Well, listen, Marc, I'm gonna leave it there. I think that was really a really good place to leave it, and I'm gonna move to our rapid fire round of questions.
Sure.
And before we do that, you did reference the white whale. So the question I will ask before we go to the rapid fire round is, do you have a white whale customer for Jonal?
No, no, it's a blue whale.
It's a blue whale, and you've got that customer
Yes.
already. So you're locked in and feeling good about that.
They recently they came in and they said that we'll give you as much work as you can handle. This is in sustainment. And there are other major companies that are trending in that direction. So yes, the future looks very bright. We are, as I talked about it, we are securing additional facilities. We're talking about additional equipment, more so than I've even talked about now, to be prepared for it.
What do you think Jonal looks like 3 or 5 years from now?
Well, if I told you on the timeline, we have the future.
Yep.
And what we want to do is we want to jump up the food chain. And I used to think it was value added per employee. I'm not quite sure that's a good, a good correlation of that. But we want to jump up the food chain. We're in a higher value added business.
You made that jump once. Nothing says you can't do it again.
Well, yes, we're looking at that. We've set up a distributing company, a logistics company, pursuing a hub zone status. We're so close to hub zone. The problem with that is when you hire someone that's in the hub zone and they have resources, they move out of the hub zone.
Yeah.
So we have that.
That's all right.
We continue to partner with the idea is to partner with your customers and actually ride with them. They have some initiatives. The blue whale I talked about, they have an initiative that they want to capture a market that they ignored, and our quote unquote competitors didn't want to go on that ride, and we hitched our wagon to that horse, and we're going to ride it, and we're going to make it very easy for them to work with us. And ultimately, I would see us having thousands of part numbers we're responsible for. A handful of every year, but it's going to be a significant, nice business.
A long-term, sustainable
Yes.
Business, which is great. That customer focus has come up over and over again. It's really great. And I said I was going to leave it there, but I do want to ask actually, one more question, because you were talking about being involved in the community and all that stuff. And just give me your take on that. One thing I've brought up on the podcast before is it's one of the things I've seen sort of repeated over and over again in the companies that are successful or successful survivors or whatever is that there is that community engagement, and there's some relationship, it seems to me, between community engagement and success in business. And I don't know if you've seen that and what your thoughts are on that.
Oh yeah, I think so. I mean, I volunteered at the hospital for 20 years and became board chair. I was on the Boys Club and became president. I did a stint at the United Way where I did the allocation panel on their board, and then led the campaign. So I do volunteer at the Chamber of Commerce. Your employees live in the community, and you want to make the community better. And as a business person, you know what works and doesn't work. Unfortunately for me, I've gotten to the stage where I'm tired of arguing with people. I think I know how to do it, and I sort of shun the board commitments now. And it's more, look, you have a task force, you have a project. Sure. You want me to give you advisory board, I will do that, but I'm not going to hang around and
rolling up your sleeves.
I'm not going to sit there for 4 meetings and argue with people of how to do it. One of the things I'm most proud of in the environment, I was a board chair. I was a president of the Boys Club, and prior to becoming the president, I had like 2 more chairs to go through. I talked to the people that were preceding me and people after me, and I said, guys, we only have 2 years of being president. Why don't we get a uniform vision of what we want to do, and then, so over 10 years we can follow through on it. And so we sat down, and we realized we had to get bigger in terms of our fundraising. So we sort of put together a plan where we hired a part-time development person, and we go from highly successful, go from a $200,000 budget to like $800,000, where we built. We raised $1.3 million to build addition on the club. I mean, it's changed, but the idea is one person can't do it, but if you can communicate that, work. You can't make a change in 2 years, but you can make a change in 10 years.
Absolutely.
And you got everybody, rowing in the same direction.
That's a really smart move, and I think that's, I don't know, it's interesting that you've been so involved in the community, and so many people are, and it's funny using those same talents and the same approach to building your business, able to, build the Boys Club and move that forward. And it's a lot of good that I think a lot of business people are doing for the community, and I think in doing good for the community, we get a lot of rewards back for that too. So it's
just not me. I mean, success has many fathers.
That's right. That's right.
Everybody has to buy into it.
That's right. Absolutely. Well, listen, awesome. That was great. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm gonna rapid fire round question you. So get ready for some hot takes. Ready? Red Sox or Yankees?
Red Sox.
There we go. Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts?
I don't drink coffee.
Okay.
Only as a drug.
Only as a drug.
But if I had to, it would be Dunkin'.
All right, there we go. I like that. Man who picks an answer. Good. When you go away, when you take time off, I should say, staycation or exotic destination?
Staycation.
iPhone or Android?
iPhone. Is there any other?
Yeah. Sports car or SUV?
Sports car.
If you could do anything.
If you said minivan, I'd go the minivan.
You've got minivan. That's the second minivan selection we've had on this podcast. If you could do anything, Marc, other than what you're doing today, what would it be?
I like what I'm doing. If you had asked me that back when I was in college, undergraduate, and if they had word processors then, I would probably have gone into being an economist.
Economist?
Okay.
Why would you need a word processor to be an economist?
My ability to write is scattered all over. So I put my ideas on a paper, and then I'll cut and paste several times before it turns out to be okay. Not good, just okay.
All right. So an economist, but only if the word processor was in full use. Do you have a favorite business book?
No. I read a lot of business books. The one I'm going to be, the favorite one is going to be the one I'm going to write someday. But
right.
The
quotes from the chairman or
Marc-isms.
Marc-isms.
Like that.
Because you had mentioned Dale Carnegie earlier. I think about how to win friends and influence people, which is a good one.
Yeah, let me tell you,
sure.
Business. So I go to UConn, and I get a degree in accounting, and I'm through the School of Business. So nowadays, I'd go back, and they have these seminars that I'll go to, and and versus the School of Engineering. School of Business, a lot of people at the School of Business, you start talking about a subject before you even finish your discussion. They tell you what the answer is. You talk to an engineering professor, and they try to do things that are impossible, and they become very much involved. So that's a difference.
The difference there,
Yeah.
absolutely. Marc, what's one thing that you learned early in your career or early in your life that you think propelled you to where you are today?
I remember we had a vice president that worked with my father from the very beginning. He was when he was at AGC, he was in the lab, and because my father got divorced, it was a let's say blended family, and there was a lot of dissension and stuff going on at work. And he said, no matter how bad things are, the energy of the company is going to be enough to go through. So you just got to work through the issues. Another thing, and it's similar to that, is when times are really, really bad and you don't know the path forward, all you can do is just make the best decision at the time, one step in front of the other. So it's just one step in front of
the other. Oh, I like that. And what's one thing, Marc, that you learned later in your career or later in your life that you wish you could go back and tell young Marc that you think would help him tremendously?
You walking down the street and you see people and you dismiss them for whatever reason you choose to do that. Everybody has a story, and everybody's equally valued. I had some medical issues, and I was once in a waiting room, and one of the persons said, "What are you who are you waiting for?" And I said, "No, it's me that I'm here for." And it's the idea that everybody has a story, and if you took the time to find out really what's about them, it'd make a big difference in your life. Certainly would have made a big difference in my life. So if I had an opportunity, life doesn't give you a chance to do overs, but it gives you a chance for redemption.
Mm-hmm.
So it's I think that's important.
Pay attention to make sure you give everyone their due. And
yeah, I mean they have a story to tell, and you should probably take the time to listen to their story.
That's awesome. That's a great one to leave it on. So, Marc, the last thing I want to ask you is we've been through a lot today. We've covered a lot of great topics. Went some places I didn't expect and some really good ones at that. What's something that you think you'd like to highlight as a takeaway for our listeners, something they could take away and apply in their life or learn from all the stuff we talked about today?
I think education is really important. I've got a number of degrees, and I'm not good in any of those degrees, but I think education opens your mind, and I think the problem with education, I think people should pursue education and take courses, even in things that are not perfectly germane to their field, but I think they should keep an open mind and try to learn different things and different perspectives. And I'm saddened by how our level of debate in this country on college campuses in the political field is not what it should be. It is demagogues, and it's a matter of stifling people, not actually hearing people. Similar to what I said about individuals. We have a political process where one guy is running and the other side has nothing to run except that guy's a jerk. And maybe that's enough, but we really have many problems in this country, and if we can't even work together on infrastructure,
we've got some
problems. So I think more education and lifelong education is important.
I would agree with that. I think for me there was a lot of really good stuff, but something that really was like sticking with me was just your whole concept on really deeply engaging in what the customer wants, and that you can't serve two masters. And if you're serving the bottom line, you can't be truly serving the customer. And I thought that was, for me personally, was super eye-opening. And
well, think about how simple it is. You can have 20 different things you say you have to do, and you have to check them off. you can forget all of that and just take care of the customer, and you don't have to worry about anything else.
There can only be one North Star, and if that North Star is the customer, you got to follow it all the way there.
But you brought it up earlier that you got to make sure you have the right customer.
Yeah, well, that's right. Well, everything else, that's a very, very good point, right? Caveat emptor on that one. Follow the customer as long as it's the right customer. Marc, that was so awesome. Thank you so very much for coming down here. It's been a real pleasure.
Well, thanks for inviting me. It's been a lot of fun, and hopefully this is the first of many.
Absolutely, Marc. Thank you.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by IT Direct.
As always, thanks so much for tuning in. I definitely want your feedback and hope you subscribe. But what I want the most is to build a community where we learn and grow with each other. I hope you're getting a lot of value out of the time we're spending together. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you next time.